So you want to get into sourdough baking and have tried building a starter, but it failed. Will a sourdough kit help you? That's what we're going to find out today. Hi, I'm Sune and I'm a food geek. Today I will review a kit from Cultures from Health called the Artisan Sourdough Bread Kit, which states on their site that it contains everything that you need to get started baking beautiful, tasty, artisan-style sourdough bread at home. We'll look at what's in the kit, and I will try making a sourdough starter using the kit. When the starter's ready, I will bake bread with the supplied recipe and try to make my master recipe using the starter made with the kit. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider becoming a member at Patreon. You can also buy some merch or use the links in the description for tools and ingredients. Those were the words. This is the review.
Let's have a look at what's inside the kit. A recipe for bread and one for pancakes. The starter culture for making a starter. I like the design of the package. A small precision scale, that'll be helpful. And a bench scraper, super crucial when you want to shape your bread. A lamb. And a razor blade. I'll show you how to attach it later. And muslin. Not sure what that's supposed to be used for, but alright. That's it for the kit. Let's make the starter. We'll need the culture, the scale, a spoon, a chopstick, some water, some organic flour. If you can't get organic, at least get unbleached. Using bleached flour can make it harder to get a starter to rise. Let's see what's in the bag. There are instructions. And a small sachet of starter culture. Oddly enough, the instructions uses tablespoons and cups and does not mention the weights. Using equal parts flour and water and volumetric will result in a starter around 166% hydration, assuming you use regular all-purpose flour. You'd probably want around 100. You get that by using the same amount of flour and water by weight. So I'm going to deviate from the recipe and do just that. So I add the culture. And some water. Oops, I should have used the tare function. Well, 17.2 minus 3.5 is 13.7. I'll just distribute the culture in the water. And add 13.7 grams of flour. Then I'll mix it with a chopstick. And seal it. And I put it somewhere warm in my kitchen. The same evening, about 12 hours later, I repeat the feeding. I don't discard anything yet, but I'll just feed it with 25 grams of water and 25 grams of flour. I mix it up and put it back in the warm place. The following morning, I do another feeding. This time I take about 5 grams of the starter and about 25 grams of water and 25 grams of flour. And then I mix it. So in the evening, I see that the starter has grown almost double its size. It's a good sign, and only in about 36 hours. So I take 5 grams of starter, about 30 grams of water, and 30 grams of flour. I did aim for 25, but hey. I mix it up and put it in a warm place. The next morning, doubled again. It's starting to look good, so I'll make more starter to be ready to bake in 2 more feedings. 20 grams of starter, 100 grams of water, and 100 grams of flour. Look at this beauty. I forgot to put a mark on the glass, but it about tripled. Okay, now we're amping it up. I'll make enough starter to make bread from their recipe and my master recipe. I'll do a 1-1-10 feeding so it'll be ready in the morning. There was so much starter I had to split it into 2 weck jars. So the following morning, I mix my master recipe, which will serve as a control. Then I mix the basic sourdough bread recipe from Cultures for Health. I add 397 grams of bread flour, 10 grams of salt, and I mix it up. Then I add 530 grams of sourdough starter. That is a ridiculous amount of starter. In baker's percentage, it's about 133%. I usually use around 20%. And then 226 grams of water. I mix it up. The recipe says to knead it, but look at it, this is not for kneading. It's downright fluid, all of that starter. I calculated the hydration and it's about 74%. The enormous amount of starter makes it seem like it's more fluid because all of the gluten in the starter's flour is spent. While the recipe doesn't say so, I'll leave it for around an hour and then do some stretches to help the gluten. Wow, this is sticky. Gluten is not great either. We'll give it some stretches. And then shape it. It doesn't look horrible after shaping. The recipe says to let it rise for 4 to 24 hours, but with that amount of starter, it seems close to insane. I'll leave it for about 3 hours at room temperature and we'll have a look. While all that shenanigans are going on, I'll stretch and fold my control 3 times, spaced out by 30 minutes. And then into my proofer. While the control is proofing, the other bread is about ready to be checked. That looks ready to bake, so I heat my oven to 205 degrees Celsius, 410 degrees Fahrenheit. About 5 minutes later, the oven's hot, so I score the loaves. But first, let me just show you how to assemble the lump. I'm not a huge fan of scoring warm dough. And I add them to the oven. After 30 minutes, I check the internal temperature. And it's not high enough, so I keep baking. I recheck the temperature after 40 minutes and now it's around 99°C, 210°F. So I remove the loaves, however anemic they look. And I let them cool on a wire rack. Alright, back to the control. When it's finished its fermentation, I remove the dough from the bulking container. And I pre-shape it. Then I leave it to rest on the counter for 20 minutes. And I put it in the fridge to retard. Then 8 hours later, I grab the dough from the fridge, dust it, flip it, score it, and then I bake it. Then after 20 minutes, I remove the top of the challenger and bake for 25 minutes more. Then I take it out and let it cool. After all the loaves are cold, I cut them open to reveal the crumb. Let me talk about what we've seen here. As for fermentation, looking at the crumb of the basic sourdough bread, it's correctly fermented. Still, the lack of gluten development due to the high amount of starter made it impossible to get a good rise. So if we look at the recipe from Cultures from Health as typed into my bread calculator, we see that the starter is a whooping 133%. So I thought I'd just look at what the recipe says. 3 1/3 cups of flour. So I typed that into my ingredient converter, and the result was way higher than in their original recipe. So I converted all the ingredients, and this is the resulting recipe. An overall hydration of about 68% compared to a bit over 74% in the original. That would certainly make a difference in the slackness of the dough. It was interesting to see what happens when you use that much starter, but my conclusion is that 133% is probably too much. I think they did it because they wanted to be confident that people would see a quicker rise, but it's just not a good recipe. I'm sure I could write one in as many sentences and make it so that people would have much more success than I think they'll have with this one. Alright, on to the sniff and taste test. Smells great. Slightly tangy, very bready. The crust smells a bit bitter, and that smell of rye. Alright, this one smells good too. Quite a bit sour, but everything else seems muted. Time to taste. This is the stuff. The reason I love sourdough bread. There are lots of great tastes here. You can taste the wheat, the rye. The tang is perfect, enough to give it character, but not let your mouth pucker. This bread tastes good, but pales in comparison. It's tangier though. It's like a yeasted bread that didn't have enough time to develop flavor. It doesn't have so much to offer flavor-wise. Also, adding a whole grain flour would help it taste better.
Okay, so that wasn't the best looking bread that I ever baked. But the important thing is that it tasted great. The recipe was weird and not good, to be honest. If you want an easy to execute recipe, use my master recipe. It's simple to use and gives impressive results every time. Follow the link in the description. Alright, so let me go over the equipment. 1. The starter culture works very well, and I could get an extremely active starter in just a few days with it. I guess that is the most crucial point. 2. The scale is excellent for use with your starter, but it's not really big enough to be used when you're baking, or at least not with the size bowls that I use. 3. The lamb is pretty good. It's well made and holds the razor blade perfectly when you get it secured. You can score your dough with it, and using a razor blade is the only way. I prefer a straight lamb, but you can make a fantastic looking bread with this. 4. The scraper is a bit on the small side in my opinion, but it gets the work done and it's nice to hold and lets go of the dough just fine. 5. The muslin. Was I supposed to cover my starter with it? A starter doesn't need oxygen, so why risk getting anything bad into the starter? Muslin has other uses though. It's a great way to distribute flour over a stencil if you want a cool design on your bread. Or you can use it if you want to strain something and ensure you only get the liquid out by passing it through a piece of muslin. Or if you're going to add aromatics to a sauce or stew and you don't want it to end up in the final dish, like say star anise or cinnamon stick, you can make a little muslin bag and fish it out when the stew is finished cooking. Well, I digress. So what do I think of the kit? It's not perfect, but the kit will get you started with sourdough bread. Is it cheating? Not at all. Who cares how your starter came to be? The kit gets an A for the starter culture, but a B- for the equipment. I think Cultures for Health should replace the muslin with a Banneton, which is the one thing that you won't have at home if you haven't been baking before. Regarding the scale, the kit caters to the American market where people are most used to volumetric measurements, however imprecise. So if you're just starting, that's just fine. If you're serious about your baking, you should get a scale that measures in grams though. If you want to look at the kit, I've placed an affiliate link in the description. That means if you purchase the kit, I will get a percentage of the sale. I hope you found this helpful and that you learned something today. See you next time.